Have you ever wondered what it means to stand firm in your faith, even when everything around you threatens to destroy it? Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful stories from the Old Testament, the trial by fire of three young Hebrews and their defiance of King Nebuchadnezzar's authority. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced the dilemma of choosing between their loyalty to God and the king's command to bow before an idol. In the midst of the blazing furnace, something extraordinary happened, something that would forever change Nebuchadnezzar's view of God's power. This story is more than a tale of courage, it's a revelation that the Son of God himself was present with those who remained faithful. Throughout this video, we'll explore how the impossible became possible and what this miracle teaches us about the presence of Christ in the Old Testament. If you're ready to witness a story of unshakable faith and miracles, like the video and join us on this epic journey. Imagine a vast kingdom where the king's authority is absolute, and his power uncontested. This was the empire of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, who ruled with an iron hand and demanded unquestioned loyalty from all his subjects. One day, he ordered the construction of a massive golden idol, a representation of his own glory and power, and decreed that everyone in the kingdom must bow before this symbol in a public display of submission. However, in the midst of a crowd bowing in obedience, three young Hebrews stood firm, refusing to worship the golden idol. This defiance challenged the supreme authority of the king and, for Nebuchadnezzar, was an intolerable insult. These young men were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They believed that the only one worthy of worship was the God of Israel, and for them, obeying the king's decree would mean betraying their faith. Even knowing the consequences, the three young men made their decision with conviction. They chose to remain faithful, despite the threat of being thrown into a blazing furnace, the terrible punishment reserved for those who disobeyed the king's command. The call to adventure lay before them, challenging them to choose between life and loyalty to God. Faced with this refusal, Nebuchadnezzar was furious. For him, this disobedience was a direct attack on his authority. In a fit of rage, he ordered that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual as a demonstration that no power could defy his will. The situation grew more intense, and the three young men were taken to the furnace, where the guards stood ready to carry out the sentence. At that moment, the crisis reached its peak. Would this be the last choice they made in life? The crowd watched in silence as the intense heat of the furnace threatened to consume everything around. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood firm, even in the face of the flames. They declared to the king, "Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace. But even if he does not, we will not worship your idol." With these words, they demonstrated unshakable faith and a willingness to face death, trusting in God's power. Their words resonated as a challenge to the supposed invincibility of Nebuchadnezzar, and the crowd watched in awe at the courage of these three men. This is the point where their journey would become legendary, a test of faith that would span generations. For them, the choice was clear: honor God above all else, even if it meant facing the flames of the furnace. What they didn't know was that the miracle about to occur would transform this moment into one of the most powerful testimonies of Hebrew faith. If you've ever wondered how far you would go for your faith, like the video and keep following this extraordinary story of courage and loyalty. As the three young Hebrews were thrown into the furnace, the extreme heat of the flames became unbearable even for the guards executing the sentence, many of whom perished just approaching the mouth of the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the midst of the fire, and the crowd held its breath, awaiting the inevitable outcome. But then, something unexpected began to happen. Nebuchadnezzar, watching closely, was astonished to see that the young men were not consumed by the flames. And then, in a moment that defied all logic and understanding, he saw an additional figure within the furnace. There weren't 3, but 4 people walking in the midst of the fire. This fourth figure was different. His presence radiated a light and serenity that contrasted with the roaring flames around him. He walked alongside the young men, and Nebuchadnezzar, in awe, exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we throw 3 men bound into the fire? But I see 4 men, unbound, and the 4th is like the Son of God." This was the moment when the impossible manifested before everyone's eyes. The one who appeared beside the young men was not an ordinary being. His appearance reflected divinity and protection. For Nebuchadnezzar, this vision profoundly shook his beliefs and his confidence in his own power. He was the ruler of a vast empire, someone who believed his will was unchallengeable. But in the presence of this fourth being, he felt a force that transcended any earthly authority. This Son of God was a manifestation of a power he didn't fully understand but knew was superior to anything he had ever witnessed. For the first time, he was faced with something that neither gold nor strength could explain. As the king and the crowd watched, the 3 Hebrews remained unharmed. They walked freely and peacefully, as if the fire surrounding them was a gentle breeze rather than a furnace heated to the maximum. The fourth being was with them, protecting them and confirming God's faithfulness in a moment when death seemed inevitable. The presence of this Son of God was a clear sign that God was with those who remained faithful to Him, and this vision would be remembered as a living proof of divine protection. For you, the viewer, the appearance of the Son of God represents the invisible strength that walks with us in the most challenging moments. How many times have we faced situations that seemed impossible, only to feel a presence that strengthens us? If this part of the story is striking a chord within you, follow the channel and stay with us on this journey of faith, where the impossible becomes possible. In the face of the extreme heat of the furnace, everything suggested that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would meet a tragic end. But astonishingly, as they walked within the flames, something extraordinary happened. They were completely untouched. The fire, which was hot enough to kill the guards who brought them near, couldn't harm them. Their clothes remained as if they had never been in a furnace, and their hair wasn't even singed. This was the miracle of divine protection, a powerful intervention showing that God's power supersedes the forces of nature. Imagine the scene: a furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, with flames roaring all around. For any observer, it was inconceivable that anyone could survive in such overwhelming heat. Yet, these 3 young men walked freely, with no trace of heat or smoke upon them. To them, the fire that was supposed to be a deadly threat was harmless. The presence of the Son of God by their side was proof that divine protection was real and powerful, shielding them from any harm. What should have consumed them held no power over them. This protection was a clear message, not just for Nebuchadnezzar, but for all who witnessed it. God was not distant. He was present with those who worshipped Him sincerely and placed their faith above all else. The miracle of the harmless fire demonstrated that, even when circumstances seemed insurmountable, God could intervene in ways that human logic couldn't explain. He was showing the world that no earthly power, no matter how threatening, was greater than His. Nebuchadnezzar, observing this scene, saw his pride and authority challenged in ways he never imagined. Those he believed he could subdue with fire were now moving unharmed, protected by a power greater than his own. And this scene was not just about survival, it was a visible testimony to the faith and commitment of these 3 young men to the God of Israel. The furnace, meant to be an instrument of death, became the stage for one of the most powerful manifestations of divine protection. This protection is a reminder that God is present, even in the most challenging situations. How often do we find ourselves surrounded by problems that seem impossible to overcome? This story teaches us that with faith, we can face any challenge, knowing that a higher power is watching over us. If you feel inspired by this message, like the video and share this example of faith and divine protection. The man who once prided himself on his absolute power and demanded unconditional submission now found himself deeply shaken. Nebuchadnezzar, the king who believed he held life and death in his hands, witnessed the impossible happening before his very eyes. He saw the Son of God beside the 3 young Hebrews, and the miracle of their survival impacted him in ways that he could never have imagined. The flames, which he had commanded to destroy them, had become harmless, leading him to a profound reflection on the God these young men served. This was the moment when Nebuchadnezzar's pride was broken, and he realized that his authority, vast as it was, had limits. He had witnessed a power beyond his own, a force that could not be intimidated or overcome. Recognizing what he had seen, Nebuchadnezzar did something unimaginable. He exalted the God of the Hebrews and decreed that no one should speak against him. To Nebuchadnezzar, that miracle wasn't just a demonstration of power but a revelation that the God of Israel was real and worthy of respect. This decree not only provided protection for the Hebrews but also served as a public statement of Nebuchadnezzar's respect and reverence for the God of the 3 young men. He understood that this God was not like other gods. He was a being who intervened directly and tangibly in the lives of his faithful. He was a God who, in the face of a blazing furnace, revealed his presence to protect and honor the faith of his followers. For the king, this was a radical transformation, a change of heart that led him to acknowledge that, as powerful as he was not supreme. By decreeing respect for the God of the Hebrews, Nebuchadnezzar offered a public testimony, acknowledging that there was something much greater than himself and his empire. He, who once bowed before idols and required others to do the same, now pointed to the true God as worthy of honor and respect. This moment of humility and recognition was an unexpected turn in the king's journey, showing that even the hardest of hearts could be transformed. For you, Nebuchadnezzar's change of heart is a powerful reminder that true power belongs to God and that no heart is beyond his influence. Perhaps you have also faced moments that challenged your faith or principles, and Nebuchadnezzar's story teaches us that acknowledging God's power can transform lives. If this message resonated with you, follow the channel and join us in exploring more stories of transformation and faith. Throughout Scripture, we find numerous occasions where the presence of Christ is revealed in the Old Testament, long before his birth in Bethlehem. These appearances and prophecies are glimpses into Jesus' mission, showing that he has always been present and active in the story of God's people. In the case of the 3 Hebrew young men, the presence of a 4th figure in the furnace, described as resembling the Son of God, is one of the most striking moments of this revelation. It's as if Christ himself had descended into the flames to protect those who placed their complete trust in God. For Christians, this moment in the blazing furnace is more than just a story of protection, it's a foreshadowing of Christ's redemptive work. The one who would one day walk among men and offer his life for humanity was already demonstrating, even in ancient times, his love and protection for those who trusted in God. Christ's presence in the Old Testament is not merely symbolic, it is a testament to his unchanging nature. He was with the 3 young men in the midst of the fire, just as he is with us in our own furnaces of life. In addition to the story of the 3 Hebrew young men, we find other references to Christ in ancient prophecies. Isaiah, for instance, speaks of an Emmanuel, which means God with us, pointing to a promise that God would dwell among his people. In Genesis, we encounter Melchizedek, a mysterious figure whom many consider a manifestation of Christ. These passages reveal that God's plan for humanity's redemption didn't begin with the New Testament but was present from the beginning. These appearances and prophecies reinforce that Christ's presence is not confined to a single moment or era. He is the manifestation of God's eternal love, and since the beginning of time, he has been with his people, revealing his glory and power. The trial by fire faced by the 3 Hebrew young men reminds us that God is with those who seek Him and that Christ is the bridge that connects us to Him, bringing salvation and hope. For you, the viewer, these references to Christ in the Old Testament are an invitation to see the continuity and depth of the divine plan. God has always been present and active, and Christ, even before His birth, revealed Himself as our protector and Redeemer. If this message of presence and love touched you, like the video and share it so more people can understand the greatness of this eternal plan. The journey of the 3 Hebrew young men and the miracle in the furnace shows us that true faith is unshakable in the face of adversity. Even in the presence of Nebuchadnezzar's absolute power, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood firm, trusting that God was with them. And God not only protected them, He revealed His presence in a visible and powerful way, showing that no human power can compare to His. This story reminds us that, in our darkest moments, we are not alone. Christ is there with us, just as He was with the 3 Hebrew young men. May the example of these young men inspire you to face your own challenges with courage, knowing that God always walks with us. If this message of faith touched you, like, share the video, and stay with us as we explore more stories of transformation and hope. See you next time.